Rebecca Thornburgh. I'm here today at the Easton Book Festival to talk with you about illustrating picture books. Ever since I was small enough to sit on a toadstool, my favorite thing to do was reading. When I was 7 years old, I said to my mom and dad, "When I grow up, I want to be a bookmaker." Now I'm grown up, well, pretty much. And I really am a bookmaker, just like I said when I was 7. So this is the story of me as a bookmaker. Or actually, me as a picture bookmaker. I create art for books, so I'm an illustrator. But what exactly does an illustrator do? Illustrators make the pictures to go with words to tell a story in a book. That's why they're called picture books, because these stories are more than just words. I've illustrated over 130 books. That's a lot of books, and that's a whole lot of pictures. I've illustrated board books, which are for very small people, and early readers for people who are learning to read, and design books, pretty much for any artist, and picture books, which are for everybody. So here's a little bit about me. I grew up in a very small town out in western Pennsylvania called Hollidaysburg. It's the home of the Slinky and me. I've loved to draw my whole life. Here's some art I did when I was younger. See if you can tell that I'm going to grow up to be an artist. This is a picture of me walking our beagle dog, Max. I think this was from 2nd grade. Notice that Max has a nose. I don't. I wasn't very good at drawing noses, so I just figured my people could do without them. In this picture, it's the doctor who doesn't have a nose. And there's a turtle chasing the horse with a stick, also a squirrel riding on the turtle's back, and a frog. But I think this is my first real illustration because it's a picture that goes along with words to tell a story, and it's quite a weird little story. I did this very creepy picture when I was a teenager, and I think all we can say about it is, ew. Then, when I was fresh out of college, I got a chance to illustrate my very first book. Yes, it is a coloring book, but it's for grown-ups. Then there were a few years I was busy doing other stuff, getting married, having 2 baby daughters, but 12 years after that very first book, I got a chance to illustrate my very first books for genuine, actual children. I did 4 books about the cuddly beasties. They have cool pop-ups inside. Since then, I've been living happily ever after as a picture book maker. So, want to see some of my pictures? I draw a lot, and I have millions of homemade sketchbooks. I like to draw regular kids, just like you guys. But it's also fun to draw angels and monsters. And of course, it's always fun to draw animals, especially when they're all dressed up. And then there are fun fairy tale folks like witches and princesses, and elves and fairies. I especially love to draw funny creatures. One time, I painted a giant bench that looks just like a polar bear. His name is Seemore. He's covered with funny little scenes featuring glasses and eyeballs. So, see why his name is Seemore? So then I painted a second polar bear bench a few years later. She now lives on the main street in my neighborhood. Her name is CHillie because we live in Chestnut Hill, and well, because she's a polar bear, so she's chilly. Let's take a quick little visit to my extremely messy studio. This is my own room, so nobody yells at me to clean it up. Here I am at my messy drawing table. Okay, this is actually my daughter Alice's doll, but with coffee in one hand and a pencil in the other, she's pretty much just like me. Here's my computer and a messy wall of clocks. I kind of have a weird thing about clocks, and I make a lot of them myself. I have a sweet little fireplace, which doesn't work, and lots of weird little things I've collected, like a pile of rubber frogs and a stone dragon and a clay vulture with a green head. Here are my paints, pens, pencils, brushes, somewhere, all very messy. This is the messy wall of clutter. I have all of my favorite pictures done by other artists tacked up where I can see them while I work. Here's my messy drawing table. And of course, I have lots and lots and lots of books, which aren't really very messy. At least I try to keep them sort of neat. Okay, let's talk about how I make the pictures for a book. There are a bunch of things to do, so get ready. The first thing that happens is that the book's publisher sends me this. It's called the manuscript. It has the words for the story, but it's not the whole story because it doesn't have any pictures yet. So I read the manuscript and read it again and again and again and again and again. Well, you get the idea. Then I do a lot of thinking about what kinds of pictures will help to tell this story. I think about it when I'm in the shower, when I'm walking the dog, when I'm folding laundry. And then I use my imagination. I think, who are the characters in the story? What should they look like? What should they wear? Are they bugs or monsters or animals or maybe just regular kids? Then I think, where does the story take place? In a boat, a bathtub, a library, or a tree? Then I wonder, what happens in the story? Is there a princess trying to get to sleep? A little magician casting a spell? A girl having a tea party with strange beasties? Or maybe a rehearsal for a school play? So I use a pencil to think too. You can actually get really good ideas just by picking up your pencil and starting to draw. I do lots of drawings. These are ideas I came up with when I was thinking about the pictures for Frosty the Snowman, and they didn't all end up in the book. Sometimes I make something that I call a character diary because a lot of times there are a lot of kids in the book and I can't remember them all. So I make this little picture that has all of their names and all of their outfits so I can keep track of them as I go through my paintings. Then I start sketching the scenes to go on each page of the book. I definitely use my eraser even more than I use my pencil. First, I draw some thumbnails. What? What are thumbnails? They're teeny weeny little drawings that could fit on your thumbnail. Sort of. Okay, thumbnails are tiny, scribbly drawings. They're ideas for what the pictures on each page will look like in a really pretty messy way. These thumbnails are for a book called Ms. Broomstick's School for Witches. After I've done all of my scribbly little idea sketches, I start to make a pretty careful drawing in pencil. This is called a spread because it's a scene that goes across 2 pages. So this is what I show the editor at the publishing company. The editor looks at all these pencils and then she lets me know if she wants me to change anything or if everything looks good and I can go ahead and start painting. Yay! Okay, now it's time to paint. Now I'm showing you a different painting project, not Ms. Broomstick, because I actually forgot to take pictures of all those paintings when I was working on that book. I scan my very finished drawing into the computer, making sure everything's the way I want it, and then I print it out onto fancy paper, which is perfect for watercolor paints. I use very light brown ink so that the drawing won't show up in the painting. So, you know how your paper gets all wavy when you put a lot of wet paint on it? It's really not a great thing, especially not for paintings for books. So, I stretch the watercolor paper by wetting it and then taping it to a board. In this picture, the paper's still wet, but once it dries, it will get really, really tight, just like a drum, and it won't get wavy even when you put a lot of paint on it. Here's the very beginning of starting to paint, just a little bit of color added. So now the painting's getting a little bit closer. I work and work on adding layer after layer of color until I finally decide that it's finished. Okay, so let's go back to Ms. Broomstick. Remember this very tight pencil drawing that I did? Here's the finished painting. It looks pretty much like the drawing, but now it's in color. And now, here are the printed pages. The words for the story are in place. Sometimes I also paint a color study. It's kind of a practice picture. It's a messy painting I make just for myself. Nobody else looks at it. And I don't try to make it perfect. I mean, just look at Pandora's goofy face. The finished painting looks a little bit like the color study, but it's also a bunch better. And Pandora looks cute instead of goofy. And now we've arrived at the printed cover. You can see the book's title, Ms. Broomstick's School for Witches. And then down at the bottom it says, by Jana Dillon. She's the author. Then it says, illustrated by Rebecca McKillop Thornburgh. That's me. It takes me about 6 or 8 months to finish all the paintings for one book. Then I send them off to the publisher. The publisher adds the type to every page and sends that off to a printer who prints up a whole bunch of copies. And then, about a year later, I get a box full of books delivered to my doorstep. And so do bookstores and libraries. Yay! Okay, now it's your turn. You get to be the illustrator. This is a little story I wrote for you to illustrate. Here's the front cover with the title The Sand Castle, and then it says written by Rebecca Thornburgh and then illustrated by you. So let's read the story together. Daisy and Sam are building a sandcastle. Let's make it magnificent, says Daisy. Let's make it magical, says Sam. Sam fills his favorite bucket. Daisy digs with her special shovel. They work hard, and the sun smiles down on them. The castle grows. Now there are 4 towers, 3 archways, 2 balconies, and a drawbridge. Flags flutter from every tower. Sam adds seashells, and Daisy digs a moat. It's perfect, says Daisy. It's finished, says Sam. Daisy and Sam visit the waves for a wash and a splash. Now the sun is saying good night. Daisy and Sam look back at their castle. They've moved in, Sam says. They like it, says Daisy. The sun has gone down, but the castle's windows are glowing. Sam says, it's magnificent. Daisy says, it's magical. So now, do you remember what illustrators do to make the pictures for a story? So first you read the words over and over until you know them really well. Then you think about what kinds of pictures you can make to help to tell the story. Then you use your imagination to figure out who are the characters in this story. Where does the story take place? What happens in the story? Now it's time to start drawing. Remember, you can make lots of drawings before you start working on the final pictures for the book. Do scribbly, messy sketches first to try out lots of ideas. Just try to get a lot of ideas down on paper. So, are Sam and Daisy regular kids? Or maybe they're animals? They could even be three-eyed aliens. What other stuff do you need for this story? Something to dig with? Maybe a little crab friend? Of course, a sand castle. And definitely a smiling sun. And when you finish adding your pictures to every page, add a picture on the cover, and then add your name right here. Ta-da! You're an illustrator. If you'd like to have your own copy of the Sandcastle to illustrate, just email me at me@rebeccathornburgh.com and I'll send you a PDF for you to download and print. So remember, you guys, you gotta just keep drawing. I know you'll create some amazing, magical pictures. If you like to read, like I do, and if you like to draw, like I do, you can be an illustrator someday too. Well, we know you already are. And now a huge thank you to the Easton Book Festival for making it possible for me to be here with you guys today. Bye-bye.